appreciate because it's nice. It's a different venue.
Hello?
Another part.
Better? Okay, I guess I don't have to shout. I'm Christy Nelson, the dean of this wonderful school in this wonderful new space, and I'm so excited to have you all here tonight for our fourth Shireman lecture, but our first event in our Donna Beagle community classrooms. This room is very busy during the week, full of classes, both small. We have a divider here to have two smaller classes and also larger classes. And that's one of the reasons we're doing this on Friday night, is because every other night we have classes in here. But so you are here as part of our maiden voyage in community events. We're very happy to have our co-sponsors and our community partners, students, friends, donors, advisory council members, faculty. It's a wonderful gathering tonight, and we have a wonderful talk for you. Most of all, we're very happy to be in this wonderful new space, and many of you have helped us get here, and we're so grateful for that. We will have our official opening on April 2nd, and we'll invite you all back for that. And at that point, we will have tours of the building and be all ready to go. You can notice from the number of paper signs and things around, we're not quite up to speed yet. But people are so happy, the students and the faculty are so pleased with this beautiful space. And we're very happy that you can come and enjoy it with us. So with that, I would like to turn the microphone over to Joan Shireman, who will talk a little bit about the history of the Shireman lecture. Joan, there you are. Okay.
Thank you, Christy. And I want to begin by expressing my appreciation, and that of my family, to the School of Social Work for this lecture series. It's very special. It's been a distinguished series, enabling us to meet with major scholars in social work. I cannot think of a more fitting memorial to Charles, whose professional life was devoted to juvenile justice, and more broadly, to policy and practice issues that affect the lives of youth. The series is a generous memorial, and it's been elegantly executed. And tonight's lecture and panel certainly continue the distinguished tradition of the lectures. The Shireman family has an endowed scholarship for graduate students, and the School of for graduate students in the School of Social Work who are planning careers in juvenile justice or in child welfare. I was asked to introduce this year's recipient of the scholarship, which I'm delighted to do. But before I do, I want to say just a word about scholarships in general. As the costs of education rise, the scholarships are increasingly important to our students. However, scholarships are having a hard time right now. Because of the last 2 years' downturn, the endowments of many of our scholarships have lost value. And if the endowments are to be preserved, there are not sufficient funds available for payouts in the form of actual scholarships for students. Many of the scholarships need to have gifts this year, which are designated as payout money, so that the scholarships for next year will be available. That's what I'm going to do with my gift to the Shireman Scholarship this year. The Shireman Scholarship, to which many of you have contributed, has helped MSW students developing careers in both juvenile justice and child welfare. This is the first year that it's been awarded to a student in our PhD program, Rika Strong. Rika graduated from our MSW program in 2002. She worked in public child welfare in the state of Oregon for 8 years. And during the last 2 years, she worked in a self-created position that focused on disparities and hiring practices of minorities and the resulting impact on service delivery. She's watching me. I hope I'm saying all the right things about her. She then moved to Clark County, Washington, where she's the diversity coordinator. Rika really makes things happen. During the 2 years she's been in her present position, Clark County has reached parity in its hiring practices of minorities, has hired persons of color in 3 of the last 4 director positions, and has received national recognition. Rika's quest for equity in hiring has led to her dissertation interests. Her research will use community-based participatory research to assist in removing systemic hiring barriers in government institutions. And Rika herself, when she told me that title, said, "That's quite a lot, isn't it?" In addition to her work with Clark County, Rika runs a private consulting firm, Chemistry Development LLC. I asked her how chemistry became part of her accomplishments, and she told me that this is a consultation firm that specializes in helping organizations become socially sustainable companies. The emphasis is on diversity, inclusion, and social justice as it relates to employees, investors, customer base, service provision, and the bottom line. Rika also continues her volunteer work. She's active on 2 agency boards and volunteers in her daughter's school. She is engaged in the daunting task of balancing work, school, and being a parent. With all of her diversity of interests and intensity of activity, Rika notes that being the mother of her 6-year-old daughter and 4-year-old son is her most rewarding task. I quote her, "They are the motivation behind my work, and my hope is that by working in major systems to remove barriers today, it will increase their opportunity when they enter into them." I'm so pleased to introduce Rika Strong to you.
What she left out of that is I also personally thank the Shiremans and especially Joan for coming and being a trailblazer for folks like me. If she didn't exist, I wouldn't be here today, and many of us wouldn't be here today. She really has paved the way and removed a lot of barriers for women in the field of social work, and so I'm very grateful to you for that, and also for the financial contributions from her family so that I am able to spend a little bit more time with those 2 little ones that are so precious to me. I was actually able to reduce my work schedule because of the scholarship that I received and be able to spend and focus a little bit more time with my children and also scheduling classes. And we all know if you're in school right now, studying. So I want to personally thank the Shireman family for your wonderful, generous gift to me. And thank you so much. So please give her a hand. As Joan has already stated, my dissertation interest is a little bit unique for social work. Typically, in the field of social work, our emphasis is on service delivery. And although service delivery is extremely important focus for us, what we oftentimes tend to miss out on are the people who are in charge of delivering that service. And what I realized in my years in working with Oregon's child welfare system is that the employees played a very integral role when we look at things such as reducing barriers and removing disparities in our systems. And so my dissertation interest is specifically on the people that we are bringing into our organizations as employees to deliver services. And what I found is, and what I've and looking over the last couple of years, is that there are disparities in our hiring practices. And if there are disparities in our hiring practices when we look at minorities, there will be disparities in our service delivery. And so that's my area of focus as a PhD student. That's what I'll be looking at my dissertation. And I'm going to share a story with you that kind of sums this all up. And if you heard this before, please bear with me. This story is from a book by Robert Thomas called Building a House for Diversity. There's a giraffe who builds a house, a beautiful house, very tall, high ceilings, very high windows so that he can look out at his beautiful view through the house that he's built, very narrow walls and tall ceilings. He's extremely proud of the house that he built. As a matter of fact, he's so proud of his house and has shared his house with so many people that he's received national awards and recognition for this beautiful house that he's built. So one day, he's down whittling in his shop, and he sees an elephant walking down the street. And he says, "Hey, Mr. Elephant, come on here and check out this house that I've built." So the elephant comes to the front door, but he's too wide to fit in. He can't fit into the house. And so the giraffe says, "Well, that's okay. Come around back. I'll let you in through the shop doors, and you can fit in that way." And so the elephant goes around and comes in back. And the giraffe wants to show the elephant his house. And so he invites the elephant in. The elephant is down in the shop, kind of whittling around. He goes, "Oh, just a second. I need to go upstairs and take a phone call." Well, some time elapses while the elephant is downstairs, and he thinks, maybe I'll go up there and check on this fella. So he attempts to take a step up the stairs, and the stairs crumble beneath him. He can't make it up the stairs. It can't hold his weight. Well, now he's really embarrassed. He's thinking maybe he shouldn't have come into the house. He's feeling a little bit uncomfortable. He says, maybe I should go up there and tell him what I've done to the stairs. So he attempts to take another step, and the walls buckle out on the sides of him. He's too wide to fit up the stairs. So the giraffe comes back down, and he looks at the elephant, who's feeling really bad and very embarrassed and thinking maybe he shouldn't have come in the first place. And he says, "What are you doing to my place? You're tearing up my house. I invited you in here. You're tearing it up. What's wrong with you, man?" And the elephant says, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I thought I was just going to come in and check out your place." So the giraffe looks at the elephant, and he says, "I see what the problem is. You're kind of heavy. You're kind of heavy on your feet. Maybe you should take some ballet classes so that you can become lighter on your feet. And you know what? You're kind of wide. So maybe you should go down to Jenny Craig and lose some weight so that you can fit up my stairs." Now, we chuckle at how ridiculous that sounds, because do elephants take ballet? No. Do elephants go to Jenny Craig? Absolutely not. We're asking the elephant to do something that's virtually impossible for him to do. And as we chuckle here and we recognize how ridiculous that sounds, we ask people to do that as they come into our organizations and systems every single day. And we chuckle. And so as I think about how ridiculous that sounds, and we kind of laugh about it here, we need to look at our organizations and look at the kinds of people that we're bringing in and make sure that it's a place where they can come in and thrive and feel comfortable being there, especially if we're asking them to go out and work with our clients. And so I kind of look at my dissertation focus as the remodeler, and to come in and do research and use the community and use the people that enter into our systems and that come and work into our systems as a way to educate us on how to remodel some of these houses. That's it. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm glad you could all be here today. My name is Tom Keller. I'm the Duncan and Cindy Campbell Professor for Children, Youth, and Families here in the School of Social Work. And I'm very pleased to be a late addition to the agenda today. Catherine Kahn, the Director of the Center for the Improvement of Services to Child and Family Services here at PSU, has been a friend and colleague of Peter Pecora's for many years, and she was very excited about being able to introduce him today. But there was absolutely nothing that could keep her from being with her first granddaughter, who was born earlier this week. So all of you who know Catherine can just imagine her beaming from ear to ear as she snuggles with an adorable little baby named Noah Luna. So I get to share with you the rest of the program this afternoon. As a new addition to the Shireman Lecture, we have a panel today. This has not been done in the past, but we are very excited about having three special guests with us to comment on the lecture. So I'm going to introduce the panelists first, and then I will introduce Peter, and then we'll be on with the program. With us today we have Art Emlin, an emeritus professor of our school and a founder of the Regional Research Institute on Human Services, which has generated a tremendous amount of research over the past 25 years. Art did pioneering work in the area of permanency planning and childcare. And I learned just today that Art has a new book coming out. Can I say that? It's entitled Solving the Childcare and Flexibility Puzzle, and it addresses the decisions that working parents, like Rika, have to make and how that interacts with public policy. I also want to note that Art was a longtime friend and colleague of Charles Shireman. So it's great to have him here today. We also have with us Erin Kelly Seal. She has served as the director. We made a slight error in the program. She's been the director of the Children and Adults and Families Division within the Oregon Department of Human Services since July 1st, 2008. And she's made many accomplishments in that role, including safe foster care reduction, relative placements and engagement, focusing on racial equity, safety in foster care, meeting the behavioral health needs of children in foster care, and improving the operational efficiency of programs so that workers can focus more time on clients and less on paperwork. And she's been able to do this despite the budget shortfall that we know is plaguing most state agencies. Before joining Children, Adults, and Families Unit, Erin served as the governor's policy advisor on health and human services. In that capacity, she advised the governor on issues ranging from hunger to strengthening protection for children in the child welfare system, transforming the mental health system for children and adults, and working on Oregon's public assistance programs. So it's a delight to have her here with us today, and she's clearly going to be able to provide an Oregon focus on the permanency planning initiatives that are currently underway. And also we have Joshua Griggs, who is a BSW student in we have a new BSW program in the school, and he was formerly in foster care. In child welfare, as you know, it's so important to include the voice of those involved in the system, so we're very fortunate to have him to provide that perspective. He's already highly regarded by my colleagues for his contribution to the discussion on foster care issues. And I just learned today that he is currently a DHS intern, and he also serves on the governor's Child Welfare Equity Task Force that is addressing disproportionality. So, as you can see, we are privileged to have several distinguished speakers with us today. Now I'll turn to Dr. Peter Pecora. He has a joint appointment as the Managing Director of Research Services for Casey Family Programs and is a professor in the School of Social Work at the University of Washington. I think this joint appointment is a reflection of Peter's deep commitment to both research and practice. He provides an excellent model of the engaged researcher whose work is highly relevant and influential. He has co-authored over 50 journal articles and 10 books, including 3 editions of the Child Welfare Challenge. And he also had a book recently come out called What Works in Foster Care, Key Components of Success from the Northwest Foster Care Alumni Study, which was an extremely large undertaking and is yielding very valuable results. He's an expert on many topics in child and family services, including program development and evaluation, family foster care, family-based services, risk assessment, and assessment of youth skills for self-sufficiency. His research interests also include areas of program planning and administration in social work, including personnel management and supervision, so maybe you can connect with Rika on that, staff development, and use of continuous quality improvement strategies in program management. So that's the academic side. But matching his impressive scholarly record is his work to develop the field of child welfare. And he's incredibly well known around the nation and the world for being so willing to come to events like this and to work with programs in states and countries around the world. He started his career as a foster care worker in Milwaukee. And he's consulted with state social service departments to refine foster care programs, develop evaluation strategies, and improve home-based services and risk assessment systems. Those efforts have even taken him to Australia as a Fulbright scholar. He is currently testing caregiver and youth empowerment approaches to helping youth in foster care access evidence-based mental health services and participating in efforts to reduce racial disproportionality in the child welfare system. Peter's numerous contributions to the fields have been recognized in many ways. For example, in 2007, he was appointed to the Institute of Medicine to explore issues related to preventing mental health disorders among children and youth and young adults. It is also a fitting tribute to his work that he was recently named a founding board member of the National Academy of Social Work and Social Welfare. So I could go on about his professional accomplishments, but I feel it's also my responsibility to tell you what kind of person Peter is. As you will see, he is blessed with an amazing mind and a tremendous amount of energy and enthusiasm. He is one of the most open and approachable and generous and helpful people you can imagine. If you want an example of a great colleague, you just point to Peter. He won me over a long time ago when I had the opportunity to take classes from him and also to work with him in the research department at the Casey Family Program. And he's still doing that on a daily basis with everyone he meets. Deirdre Edwards, who played a huge role in organizing this event, was just very impressed with how flexible and agreeable Peter was, and she went on and on about how great it was to work with him. And that's just the way he is. So it's a true privilege for me to introduce to you the distinguished speaker for the 4th Annual Shireman Lecture, Professor Peter Pecora.
That was very kind of you, and I'll be able to hopefully use this mic and we'll
Okay.
You know, you only do great things when you have great people working with, frankly, in this world. You can always stand on the shoulders of those who supported you, coached you, mentored you when you were young. So I've been very, very blessed to have a great group of people to help me with including the mic. How's that? Back on. All right. And as you can tell, I'd probably be able to hear me with my mega mouth, even if I wasn't on this mic, my NPR voice, as they say. Today, we have a great opportunity. I really thank the school and Joan Shireman and folks for inviting me to be here today to honor Professor Charles Shireman with this lecture. And I really especially appreciate how Art Emlin, Joshua Griggs, and Aaron Kelly-Seal have taken time on a Friday afternoon, early evening, to spend time with us on this topic area. We're going to focus on 3 areas today. I'm going to try and highlight some of the achievements of the early permanency planning pioneers. So if you didn't know about this, you'll learn a little bit more about the Oregon Permanency Planning Project that started right here. I'll try and review some foster care placement trend data. So whether you like stats or not, we're going to take 10 minutes and run through some of the latest foster care statistics on what's happening in foster care across the country using the 2008 AFCARS data. And then I'm going to discuss some key challenges that we're facing today around permanency planning and talk about the strategies and some of the solutions that Erin and our colleagues across the country are actually putting into place to do something about this. And included with that, you might see we're going to have 3 video clips, little video clips from the voices of from folks from a brand new 14-minute video that you can pull down off the net for free that showcases a little more some of the challenges and successes of families who are reuniting with their family members, in this case in the state of Texas. So that's what we're going to try and do today. I'm going to try and move this, keep pretty well on track here if we can do time-wise. I think it's important to take a quick look back, and what we can do is, let's see if this works. Great. To remember that foster care in America started out as almshouses and workshops, and there were very few children in foster care. And then in the 50s and 60s, it started to build to the point where we were up to placing 262,000 children in foster care in 1982. At about that time, 50s and 60s, we started to have some exposés of foster care. Give you an example. Ken Wooden did this fantastic book called Weeping in the Playtime of Others. And it was an exposé of children waiting for a forever family. So drifting in foster care, kids not experiencing many placement changes to try and get back to their family. So we started to have in the 50s and 60s, Moss and Engler, other people did studies that basically said, we really have got to do something about what's happening in foster care. So truth in advertising, as you heard Dr. Keller mention, I did begin my social work career working with runaways and foster families in the early 70s. And despite positive intentions, we did not have much of a practice model back then to guide how we worked with children and families. For example, we didn't sufficiently recognize the urgency of helping children find a family who could raise them on a long-term basis, forever families of one kind or another. I think our knowledge base at that time about how to help children heal from the traumas of child abuse and neglect and how to heal from some of the traumas of placement moves was fairly sparse. So we knew fairly little about how to help children address the emotional, behavioral, and substance abuse problems that either help them bring them into care, because about 18% of the children under care enter not because of abuse and neglect, they enter because of behavioral problems today, or these behavioral problems were preventing them from leaving foster care into another home, either a return home or a new family. So as you might imagine, consequently, the safety, permanency, education, and mental health outcomes for children in care were not as positive as they could have been. So we need to begin any discussion about permanency planning by talking about foster care practice at that time and acknowledge then some of the achievements that the Oregon Permanency Planning Project, which was based right here at Portland State University, some of those achievements that they contributed to the country. So what you had is you had Art Emlin, you had Vic Pike, you had Mark Harden, you had Janet Lady, and you had other team members of the Oregon Permanency Planning Project. They helped launch a very important national set of reforms in foster care. They seized the moral high ground, emphasizing that children need and deserve a family. And then we had adoptive experts. Think about it at that time, late 70s, early 80s. We had adoptive parent experts begin to rethink what was an acceptable adoptable child, and then what was an acceptable adoptive parent. So we had some very important rethinking about the whole adoption field at that time. The permanency planning pioneers also helped us become more intentional in our practice to help focus on what's most important for children and families. Because if you've ever been a child welfare worker and you have 18, 20, 25 cases, sometimes it's very hard to sort of focus when you're sitting in that family's kitchen, what's most important for me today with this family, with this child where I'm sitting there. And that's what I valued about some of the most about what Art and his team and the Oregon Permanency Planning Project and their allies provided. But let's just step back for a minute, because I'm using a term permanent. So let's define it. I'm going to use a working definition that Sue Badeau helped craft. And from her definition, permanency consists of 7 facets. A parent or two. The child has to have a parenting relationship with at least one adult. Secondly, intent. There's got to be a mutual understanding that is established that this relationship between this child and this caregiver is intended to last forever. Third, unconditional commitment by the adults at least, and that, as you all know, if you've been in care, foster care or fostered or adopted, that can sometimes be a little bit challenging. The fourth, participation of all parties in the relationship. Fifth is lifelong and mutual support and involvement. We're in this for the long haul, right? If you're adopting, you're being a guardian, you're reunifying, you're in it for the long haul. Sixth is intimacy and belonging. You know, how do we refer to these children? My son, my mom, my dad. That's very important. And seventh is there's this sense of status, how the world views your relationship, because that's really important to be part of a family. And so that's a vital part of permanency. So I think Sue, who, by the way, is an adoptive parent of 12 children and has fostered 20, has really got it right on this one. But I think we need to correct a misnomer. Permanency planning is not back-end work, because that's what sometimes, especially people new to the field, they think of permanency planning and think of it as all back-end work. And when Art and his team and the folks who got involved with permanency planning did this, they viewed it as front-end work. And it began, if you read the writings carefully, permanency planning, you'll know that effective permanency planning begins when a CPS report first comes in. And it begins with that initial assessment of what the child and family need to stay together. And if that's not possible at that stage to do that safely, then what's going to need to happen to have that child have a forever family down the road? So it really is about front-end work as well as it is about some of the back-end work that we hear talked about so much. In addition, I think in terms of dispelling some notions here about what it is and what it isn't, I think what the field also valued so much about permanency planning was the Oregon team's focus on being intentional in practice. Intentional. For example, the Stein, Gambrill, and Wilsey classic study done in Alameda County in the late 70s, that landmark study documented how much more effective a worker could be by intentionally focusing their conversations with birth and foster parents around what specifically needed to change for the child to return home, and what each party could do to help make that happen. And conversely, when family unification was not possible, what needed to be done? In addition, the Oregon Permanency Planning team, I think, taught thousands of workers across the country about the value of child and parent-centered case planning. We might take that for granted, but it certainly wasn't the case in the 60s and 70s that the way we did case planning was to make it very much child and parent-centered. And how they taught us how to use mutually developed and signed case plans to help clarify the sort of key steps, the key actions that needed to take place for that family to either stay together or to be reunified. And some of the things that we take for granted now as basic practice concepts were really introduced and emphasized and reinforced in the late 70s and early 80s with this Oregon Permanency Planning Project. Now, in the Japanese Kaizen approach to CQI, to continuous quality improvement, that whole approach to quality improvement in Japan, if folks don't realize, was really started and informed by three Americans, Duran, Cosby, and Deming, if you know that literature. And what they did is they worked with the manufacturers over there, and the Japanese industry was very quick to pick up on some aspects of this. With a Kaizen philosophy, you're making hundreds of tiny improvements over time until you get something right. Now, that's how they believe a professional field slowly but very carefully makes very good improvements. And I think in our field, many times that is exactly what happens. However, sometimes I think our field takes a more dramatic leap forward in relatively short periods of time. And that was what was happening with permanency planning in the late 70s and early 80s. The field took this leap forward, and I think we've got people to thank, like Art Emlin and other permanency planning pioneers who helped us. If you remember that time, and I was going back to grad school. I had practiced in foster care for a number of years. It was like time to sort of re-gear up with a practice model, and that's what that movement gave to us, was a practice model when child welfare really needed a conceptual practice model. That was very, 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 made a lot of common sense. So today, I think, like then, we're poised to make a major leap forward because we now need a new movement of permanency planning. We need to sort of take the best of the spirit of the original permanency planning movement and accelerate it and move it forward, and I'll show you why in a minute or two. So here's where we will look at some stats. First, I will go through a few statistics, and we'll see how this goes here. Come on, there we go. Child maltreatment is still with us, right? Obviously. Nearly 50,000 children are reported for child abuse and neglect every year. We have nearly a million, about 794,000 confirmed victims of child abuse and neglect in 2007, which is the most recent data that I'm aware of. So, and we think those numbers are going to go up a little bit with the economic downturn, right? At least that's what the frontline social workers in hospitals and some of the police department officials I talk with are telling us. And you've heard the stories on NPR, you know what's happening that way. So that, okay, we've got that happening. It's also important to look that we've had a pretty steady and significant increase in the number of children in foster care. And I've got some of the very early Toshi Tatara stats in there, as well as when you get up to a little later in the years, they're from the AFCARS, the Automated Family Assessment, the official federal foster care system. And you can see the data there. And we peaked as a country with over 500,000 children, 568,000 children in foster care on the last day of the federal fiscal year, which is September 30th. In 1999. So we had a huge number of children of color coming into care. We had steadily mounting numbers of children in care. And that's when, in the 70s and 80s, the whole permanency planning movement said, hey, we got to do something about this. And if a child's going to stay in care, we better minimize the number of placement moves and really help them out. More recently, we've had a steady, slow but steady decrease, thank goodness, in the number of children in foster care. So the numbers are starting to come down, as you can see there by the most recent, that red histogram bar. And that decrease is mostly due to a decrease in entries. The number of children coming into care has been slowed down. And there's a number of reasons for that, one of them being alternative response systems and the networks of community-based family support systems. And we're getting much better at reaching out to families who are at risk of abuse and neglect and trying to help support them. So that's what they're, and what you see, these are the histogram bars that show you of all the states. And it shows there I'm not going to risk doing this with the pointer, but oh, there it is, thank you. There is that's the national rate in 06, and then here it is in 08, and you can see there's some national improvement going on. So you look at, when you want to look at reducing foster care, you got to look at the number of children coming in, the entries. You got to look at length of stay, how long children are staying, and you want to look at the rate of exits. We're going to look at entries and exits for a minute. Okay? So you can see where Oregon is in that group, and there's a wide variation among states right now. It depends on the economy, how systems are organized, how generous our legislatures are in funding our social service agencies, et cetera. The slight decrease is due to those entry rates that I mentioned. And when you look at it by age ranges, again, 06 blue, red is 08, you can see that for most age ranges, we've had a decrease in foster care. This is the rate, actually this is the sheer numbers of children in care. And so that this sort of reduction of children in foster care generally is occurring across all age groups. There's a few exceptions to that, and let's look at that next. And yes, this is the children who are under 1. So this group of children are some of the children that we worry the most about, don't we? These are the children who can't defend themselves. They're the most fragile children. They are among those in the ages on 5 and under are the children who show up who are more child abuse mortality. Our mortality rates. Those children who are killed in care or killed by their parents before they get to care, I should say. And these are the children we really worry a little bit about. And what keeps workers up at night a bit is the children under 1. And you can see here that the rates there for children under 1 for entries has actually, the rate has increased a bit recently in the last 2 years. So children under 1 should be one of those special groups that we worry a little bit about. And another area we ought to worry about is foster care exit rates, because the foster care exit rates across the country have dropped. So if your entries keep piling up, if you don't have your exit rates at a good pace, you start to have a backlog of children in care, and your rates go, your numbers in care go up again, which means caseloads go up, and we can't invest that extra time with children that we need. And let's just think about that. With the initial successes of family reunification and adoption campaigns, many states now have a pool of children remaining in care with more complex mental health and family situations, right? And so so they're having a little bit of a challenge in moving those children, the more difficult, more challenging youth, who have more challenging family situations, out of care. And you can see here, and again, these are on the PowerPoint side, so you can look at those later, but you can see that's the array of the states there, and it shows you that state rates of exit per 1,000 children range from about 1.5 per 1,000 children to 8 per 1,000 children. So there's a huge variation across states. And what that means to me, at least, is we've got some excellent opportunities to help states who are struggling with exits, struggling in this area, improve their rates of exit, while we're helping other states maintain their success. And then finally, this last data slide, got through that fast, huh? Is all about oh, wait here. Let's see. Hold on. Where is that slide? Oh, that's it. That's the slide I want. I'm sorry. Well, one before that was another one. But this one slide, you were probably saying, what is he talking about here? This is the percent of children who exit from foster care in a state, but who exit from foster care in a legally permanent living situation. So let me define what that is. That's family reunification, adoption, placement with relatives, where they leave care, or legal guardianship. Okay? That's what we would generally call a legal form of permanency in the United States. It doesn't mean emancipating out to living under a bridge. It doesn't mean emancipating out as an independent living person. Okay? That's not what many of us, what we call legal permanency. Okay? And so with a national average, it's 87%. That means 13% of the children are leaving foster care without legal permanence. Now, most of us would say, you know, that's still pretty good, 87%, but we've got some room for improvement there, right? Because what we'd want is 100% of children leaving foster care, if at all possible, with some form of legal permanence. And we'll talk about in a minute about why that's so important. The reason is that there's a sizable group of children who stay in foster care for a year or more. It's more than you think. I don't know, that number always surprises me. 17% of children have been in foster care for 3 years or more. Do you know anything about a child's sense of time, a child's sense of time? It's much more elongated than an adult's sense of time. So 3 years for a child is a forever amount of time, depending on the age range there. So we've got a number of children who are in care for a sizable amount of time. We also have 29,000 youth who sort of emancipate into adulthood every year. And that number's been creeping up a little bit. So 29,000 emancipate from children care. Over 80,000 on any one day in time, over 80,000 children are in some form of group care. Group homes, residential treatment, psychiatric hospitalizations. Now, most of us would argue that's not a very family-like environment, though we all know high-quality group care, and we all know probably people who work in a high-quality residential treatment center. But none of us, I think, would argue that that is a family-like setting and children should grow up in those institutions. And too many children are emancipating from foster care from group care. That's their last step out. And so that could be a problem, right? Because in group care, you tend not to maintain some of those family ties, and you don't have necessarily a mentor who can help you. And maybe when you leave care, who are you going to stay with? So there are those real challenges in trying to exit from group care with some type of a permanent plan of some kind and a network of relationships to support you. So what's going on? What are county and state child welfare leaders telling us about this situation? And then what can we do about it? Because you came here wanting to explore some answers and not just hear some concerns. And yet we've got such an excellent set of successes along the way in child welfare that we can build on. This is a very, very important time to be working in this field. But let's talk about an area that I think will underscore some of this. You know, as part of their recent federal policy changes, there is a case goal in child welfare now called APLA. APLA, Alternative Planned Living Arrangement. And we're doing work right now with counties in Florida, Ohio, Alabama, and Colorado. And I think we might be offering a little support to Aaron and Joshua here on a new permanency roundtable project. Maybe my research team might be pitching in. We're not sure yet. We have to talk and see if we can be of help to them. But county and state leaders all across the country are starting to worry about the growing number of children in this APLA case goal category, because it's now becoming what a rallied against years ago as a place for maybe kids shouldn't spend so much time, and we should have probably a very few number of children in APLA, not the large numbers we have now. So we're all starting to recognize that this might be this might be the need for our new round of permanency planning reforms in the United States, and we're better able to take this on than we ever have, and I'll tell you why in a few minutes here. Because we think it's, the state leaders would say it's just not good enough to raise a child in foster care when our outcome studies are showing us that too many of the children in foster care as young adults are experiencing homelessness, high unemployment, untreated mental health conditions, early parenthood, and other negative consequences. There are so many success stories about youth in foster care and foster care alumni that never make it into the papers. But on the other hand, if we keep children in foster care and they don't maintain social support networks and they don't get a forever family, it's a little hard for them at age 19, 20, or 21 to all of a sudden find themselves on the street trying to fend for themselves. And that's the dilemma here. And that's why a new round of permanency planning is what we all believe this country needs. So in contrast, we think about what we'd want for our own children if we died unexpectedly, or for our nieces and nephews if they were orphaned. What we would want is we would want them to have a caring adult in their lives who would be there for them over the years. So when we talk about independent living preparation, right? Independent living, this life skills stuff. Taking an independent living class, I think, pales in comparison with the power of a parent who can act as a guide and a champion for you. You know, we all want a person who can teach children the things they need to know and help connect them to others who can support their journey through life. So if we truly want to help youth in foster care learn life skills for being a successful adult, we need to help them achieve legal permanence with a caring adult who can coach them through life and be a grandparent to their children. I want to quote Estaquio Beltran. Estaquio Beltran is a foster care alumnus, and he's now a special assistant to Congressman Dennis Cardoza. And his quote is, if it's not good enough for your child, it's not good enough for me. And what he's referring to are the thousands of children in foster care in the United States. And I thought it was a very powerful quote from Estaquio. So clearly for the prevention-oriented people in the audience, and I think most of us would say there's one part of us that really wants to be more upstream in this area. One answer to this whole situation is for society to invest should be willing to invest as much to keep a family together as we would spend to tear them apart, okay? By placing their children, right? But let's think about that common sense principle. We as taxpayers should be willing to spend as much to keep a family strong and whole as we would spend to place their children. It just makes good common sense, right? But that's not always possible, right? And sometimes our legislatures don't understand that. So now for the children who are placed in foster care, for the group of children that Erin and her colleagues and where all of us need to work with, we need to be analyzing placement and agency performance data carefully to pinpoint groups and special needs of services. And that's what child welfare leaders across the country are actually starting to do. And that's where I think this new roundtable project is emerging from some of these analyses. When you pinpoint this group of children, it creates a sense of urgency. And when you look at system dynamics, sometimes you need a sense of urgency to sort of get things mobilized in a way you would normally. And that's what the original Oregon Permanency Planning Project did too. It created a sense of urgency across the United States. In some states, these groups of children are called the cold case files. Children sort of stuck in care, and they're saying, oh my gosh, let's do something about these children. And in Los Angeles, they brought back the best of the retired caseworkers, and they had them work those cases. In other counties, they've got a special office wall for these kids, and they're called the heartbeat kids. And those are children who are in care for 18 months or more, and they want to make sure that those children really get a chance to have a chance at life with a lifelong family. And so that's an example of how agencies are sort of trying to call out and bring to workers' attention and supervisors' attention to remind themselves that they're a group of children that really should be trying to do some other creative efforts around. So that's what some counties and states are trying to do here. So for the last part of the presentation today, and I hope my allergies are not going to cause my sinuses to give me too much trouble here, we're going to try and review what I consider, and what many people consider, some of the most challenging, some of the most major permanency planning challenges that we have in the United States, and along with some of the strategies, some of the things that very courageous child welfare leaders across the country are actually doing about these challenges. So that's what we're gonna move to next. Okay. So first challenge. No family members available. No family members seem to be available to step up to the plate. No family members seem capable. Well, this is what's beautiful about being in this field at this time. At no other point in history have we had such an array of practice science now to help us. We know more about how to do things right in the child welfare field than we have ever known before. Because we've got, sure, we have research gaps and practice gaps, but the science of child welfare practice is really starting to come into shape here. And let's talk about it. And I think you'll believe, if you're skeptical, I think you might believe me when we're done here. One of the things we're learning is that family finding techniques, the same techniques that they use to find relatives in a Red Cross disaster, or that the Mormon Church uses to find long-lost relatives, are being adapted to find family members in child welfare agencies across the country. Started up a few miles north of here in Washington State, Catholic Family Services, family finding, that is sweeping across the country. How do you do this? How do you find families? Family group decision making, another important practice development that we were lucky enough to borrow from the people in New Zealand. Family group conferencing, family group decision making is becoming one of the core standards in child welfare today. You don't do good practice in child welfare if you don't do those. Now, I think we need a little more research about what elements of family group conferencing is the best and what makes a difference, but that's happening. And then looking and scanning for fictive kin, as if family members, and coaches, and mentors, and teachers, and nurses, and sometimes it's a school bus driver that'll want to adopt a child. A second area that's a big challenge is that some teenagers, especially teenagers, they don't see adoption as a viable option for them. So what do you do with that, right? And what the best workers are telling me is that we've got to make vigorous and continuous efforts and re-efforts to help children see what form of permanency will be the best for them. And for some it's adoption, for some it's legal guardianship, for some hopefully for many children it's reunification with a birth family member, but it's that visiting and revisiting. And then when maybe adoption is not the best option, then that you can go after a legal guardianship and create a parent caregiver kind of relationship for that child that they might not have. Because in certain cultural groups, termination of parental rights and adoption is not not looked on very positively. And so if we're going to really have culturally competent practice, we have to be looking at culturally respectful forms of permanence. Okay, here's where I'm going to dash over. And sometimes it's the voices of family that oops. There we go. No.
The best part about being home is having my family.
What I miss most when I was away from my family was my family.
My mother, my brother, my aunts, my uncles, my little baby cousins.
And I can see them every day. When I wake up, I know they're there. When I go to sleep, I know they're still there.
Every child needs to have someone that loves them and has a place to call home.
We'll have two more clips a little later, but I wanted to share with you is just that you'll hear from that young adult in a minute, but that's this notion of missing family. And until there are very aggressive reunification efforts for some of those children, they will not give up. They will not give up. And they will want to be reunified until they know that that's not really an option. which is another reason why in the early permanency planning days there was such an emphasis on visitation. And one of the healing parts of visitation is children really confront some of the fantasies they have about their birth parents and really start to work through some of that. And when we don't have visitation, sometimes that can really start to interfere with that process that we need for permanency planning. And just what Sue reminds me is that sometimes permanency planning involves retrying strategies that you tried 6 months or 12 months ago because they didn't work then, but all of a sudden things work. So it's that retrying things is really important. Another sort of challenge is that the child's health, behavioral, mental health conditions get in the way of reunification. I think those of us in the field, know children where most adoptive families would say, oh, I can't handle those behaviors, or a guardian or a coach would say, I'd love to take that child in and make them my own, but I can't handle this kind of the depression that child's experiencing or the lashing out that they do. So here's where I think our mental health science colleagues and the people doing work at the Oregon Social Learning Center and other places have done some excellent work. We now have better treatments for mental health. And I'll mention just a few. We all could develop a huge list. But trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. CBITS, which is the school-based version, a milder version for milder trauma and depression, has had some very good scientific evidence. Functional family therapy. Jim Alexander's work that started in Utah years ago. Now more and more child welfare agencies are using functional family therapy to help families, foster families or birth families, work better for children when they're at that really difficult adolescent point in their lives. Multidimensional treatment foster care, and Project Keep, which is sort of a family foster care related area. So that, we could go on, but we're really starting to have much better treatments for depression, anxiety, and explosive disorders. Project Match is another one, if you're listing some out, that is now under with John Weiss and Bruce Torpeda is doing some excellent work in that area. And here's to
She started out in foster care with a couple, along with her other 3 siblings. That's when she started into foster care. From there, well, she went, instead of going uphill, she went downhill, and she was removed, so she kept hopping from one place to another. That is when I had started misbehaving, and I had to be taken away from them to another home. What I wanted to happen in terms of me going to live, I really, really wanted to go back home with my mom. But obviously it wasn't doable at the time.
Through her 9 years, she had accumulated multiple diagnoses, a lot of medication, a lot of unhealthy coping skills so that she would express her anger and frustration and harm toward other people, aggression, verbal and physical aggression.
When I was in care, I was so determined not to get adopted. When her rights were terminated, I was just the devil's child. I would not stay in one place.
Within a few months of coming home, she was off of all of her medications. She was going to school every day, whereas before she was having truancy issues, and she even lost a lot of credits because she refused to go to school. There were no behaviors, no crises, not one issue when this youth was home. And so this youth who was, on multiple medications and had multiple diagnoses is no longer considered mentally ill, no longer considered to have mental health challenges, which tells us maybe she didn't have any biologically based mental health challenges, but she really just needed to be with her family.
The only place I really ever wanted to be was home. No matter how much help I received from care, trying to work it out in foster homes, it's kind of a little pathetic because my family, it's nothing compared to being with my family and working out all those problems with people people who you love.
Now, you might say, all right, that's a rare case. We had nothing, all of the behavior problems went down to zero. You can bet they're going to hit some rough spots right over the next few months. This was just filmed just last year. But from the caseworker you heard from, really the number of issues with her went down dramatically. Again, because what was at the heart of this child's rebellious behavior and anxiety and depression and lashing out was the fact that she really wanted to be home. So there is this element of when we talk about 54% of children in foster care, foster care alumni having one or more mental health conditions, we have to worry about, well, what's the cause of that depression or anxiety, or what's exacerbating that condition? Okay, we're going to wrap this up in 5 minutes here, and I want to make sure because we have time for the panel. So let me just talk a little bit about some other challenges here. An obvious one is the adoptive families. But here again, here's where creativity and practice science are really evolving. How many people have seen this? Is it a Wednesday's child, a Thursday's child, a Tuesday's child you have here? Okay. How many people have seen those exhibits where professional photographers take pictures of adoptive children who are free for adoption? There are these beautiful exhibits that come up. A guy from Hawaii started that. Fantastic. They're spread up all over the country where they're doing these exhibits. In fact, I was just down I was in the New Mexico Department of Social Services headquarters just recently, and they had a number of those on the walls. They looked beautiful of the children that they had gone through those, and that was their way of sort of honoring those children and honoring that project. There's an actual cable TV show. The guy's a crazy man, but if you ever hear him speak, he created this TV show in New York City on cable TV called You Gotta Believe, and it's a show that teenagers who are freed up for adoption do the show once a month, and it's all about adopting older youth in care and how it can happen. It tells their stories. So that was really exciting. So we've got a lot of creativity going on. Mark Charon in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, pulled in some high-priced law firms, and he said, listen, you've got to give back to the community, and I need some pro bono work out of you to help me get and address the backlog of children who are freed for adoption or aren't quite freed yet for adoption and need some illegal paperwork. So there are places all over the country that are trying to step up to the plate here around getting the shortage of adoptive families. We, I think, sometimes forget how powerful our juvenile court judges are and the court systems can be. And when they're not operating right and you have long legal delays or when you don't have good legal representation for birth parents, sometimes bad things tend to happen. And so we wouldn't whole range of strategies around court reform right now because sometimes the child welfare caseworker and the supervisor can do fantastic work, and their fantastic work is being undermined by a court system that's overloaded or not functioning right. And the courts are really starting to step up and do something about that. And there's some great leadership among judges across the country to do that. And last, it relates to our dissertation here, it's the whole notion of paying attention to your workforce. And that if we don't have sufficiently low caseloads and if workers aren't getting the coaching they need, it's going to be hard to do some of these reforms. So it's paying attention to our line staff and making sure they've got the coaching and training that they need as well. I mentioned permanency roundtables here, and I used Georgia as an example. Georgia was, like we mentioned, was very concerned about their APLA youth. And in fact, there was a lawsuit in Georgia around the APLA youth. And so they took a look at that, and they did roundtables for 697 children. And that's where they bring the workers and the family and folks together, and they take a sort of a fresh look at what's happening in that family and the child situation. And they did those last years, and we're tracking that for them, satisfaction forms, and we're helping them mine their MIS data and just looking at that for them. And already, out of those 697 children, almost a third they've attained legal permits for them. A third. And this was a really challenging group of backlogged children there. About a third, 30%, were reunified back home. About a third were adopted. And about 30% were found legal permanents through a legal guardianship kind of a situation. So Alabama, there's a number of states starting to move in this direction. So we think based on some of the roots of the Oregon Permanency Planning Project, there's a whole new wave of permanency planning starting to sweep through the country. And one of the strategies, which is actually a whole group of strategies embodied into one, is called these permanency reviews or permanency roundtables. I'm going to close with a video clip, but I want to leave you with 5 key questions, which are in your handout. Well, actually, they're not in your handout, I think. 5 key questions for successful permanency planning. I'm not sure if these are or not. And that is, actually, I bet you they're there. I can't remember what I added at the last minute for you. Oh, I didn't. I think so. I added this last minute. So, 5 key questions from Sue Badeau and the New York Longest Waiting Children's Project. What will it take? What will it take to help this child find permanency? Second question, what should we try that has been tried before, and let's try it again? Third, what can we try that has never been done before with this youth, but we should try it anyways? How many things can we do concurrently? That's the other practice science that emerged from Linda Katz up in Washington State. Concurrent planning, sweeping the country, parts of Europe, parts of Australia and New Zealand right now. Simultaneously working towards reunification and thinking about what the backup plan is. And not waiting till the end of the reunification period to start thinking about the backup plan, but doing both simultaneously. And then finally, how can we encourage the youth who really should be taking charge and to the extent possible and should be involved in every step of the way in thinking through permanence for themselves? How can we involve them? Those are the 5 key questions at least we're having some success with as we work on permanency planning projects across the country. And I will end with this last
It's an ambitious goal, but we think it's possible to help the legal system, the child welfare system, start thinking about community options for youth with significant needs.
Agencies and individual caseworkers can do a variety of things to support youth in care, reintegration for youth in care. Among those would include providing time for staff to be able to work with families and those youth, transportation for families to be connected to their youth, training for staff, good connections within the community, and agencies must be able to provide flexible funding to allow these programs to be successful.
I can't necessarily put a finger on what has been the most enjoyable or the best part of Matthew coming home, other than that's the way I think it's meant to be.
It's a good feeling to see them come up together, and we'll be part of it. It's a good feeling.
It's a good feeling, you know. You can't get any better than that.
He means the world to me. He means the world to me.
So, in closing, the practice and policy challenges I think we've talked about today and the panel's going to comment on, I think are not trivial. These are major issues. These are major challenges we have. But county and state agencies are starting to make tremendous strides in addressing this. And this kind of success is very rewarding, not only for the children and families that you can see on the video clips, but also for the line staff and supervisors who, as part of these roundtables, they're getting line staff, they're getting headquarters staff act as policy barrier busters for them. Phone call from them saying, we're stuck on this, here's the policy that's getting in the way, and to the extent that they can, you've got people back at your policy headquarters trying to figure out new solutions to these policy barriers. Very rewarding for workers to get new ideas and not have these roundtables viewed as sort of a case review in a punitive sense, but as an opportunity to think creatively with some supports around what could be done differently. That's the most exciting part of this work. If you want to see the full version of this 14-minute video, on the last page of the handout is the actual URL, the website where you can go and click on that. If you want a copy, there are ways to order that as well. If you want to know more about the Georgia Permanency Roundtable work that we're doing, we have a process report about what were the barriers that the workers reported that they were having to address. That's up on the website, and you have that as well. So thank you, and I think with that, we're probably going to turn to our panel for comments, and then we'd be happy to try and address any questions or comments as a group from the room. Okay? Thank you.
So Peter has given us a lot to think about, and he provided some materials in advance for the panel. So they each have about 3 to 5 minutes of maybe paired comments to get things started, and then we'll open it up for a discussion that can include all four here. So, want to start with Art, or would you like to?
All right, you said 5.
Okay, you can take 5.
I just want to thank Peter, first of all, for your generous comments and your remarks. Your just work is so significant and heartening, and you returned me to my child welfare roots and taken me far beyond, and I appreciate that. I'm honored to have been asked to express my thoughts. And 60 years ago, I was a child welfare worker in San Luis Obispo County in California. And so, too, was my wife sitting back there, Bitsy. She was, San Luis Obispo was easy compared to her second stint. She was also a child welfare worker in New Orleans, in Orleans Parish, when I was working on my PhD at Tulane. And and then, you know, things happened. I heard Henry Moss talk about children in need of parents, and then I did a postdoctoral with Henry, and then I came to Portland State and taught child welfare, and in our research institute, as Peter mentioned, I was asked to evaluate the Vic Pikes project, which began with that question, is this child likely to return home? But for the past 30 years, I've been immersed in something else, studying the child care arrangements of working parents. And those parents have the unquestioned right and freedom to make arrangements of their own choosing. Mostly they make the best decisions that are feasible, yet much of that feasibility depends upon the family's economic capacity, on jobs, on working conditions, wages and benefits, and tax fairness, and whatever social support and flexibility that family can have in its immediate environment. And they may also be assisted by a variety of safety nets in our country, and tattered and torn though they may be, and services from unemployment benefits to health services. So obviously, child care has something in common with child welfare. They both depend upon the sustainability of families. Child welfare, however, enters the picture, as you know, when children are in peril because the parents are unable to sustain their protective role, the traditional protective role. And this, of course, then evokes a response, a protective response in the community. When complaints are made to a child protective agencies, child welfare agencies play an absolutely indispensable role in sorting out what is needed to be done and what legal authority may be required. And the protective impulse, I think, is probably universal. And much of it is carried out informally in the neighborhood and by parents themselves. As a mother who leaves a baby on a doorstep with a note, for example. The parents may also recognize their need for shelter care or for a homemaker service, or their need for drug treatment while their child's in care, in a foster care placement, perhaps with relatives, in temporary care or long-term care, and with the kind of permanency that Peter has shown us is possible. In many fields, it is customary to argue about the costs and benefits of doing things upstream to prevent worse things from happening downstream. But that's not always possible. And as Peter's research suggests, with clarity of purpose and ample resources, you can save money. And that could be true at every step. It's worth investing in safety net, every safety net within the system of child welfare services, just as it's worth investing in every strand of the social and economic fabric sustaining all families. Most families have not fared well in recent decades, and the competition among services will not suffice. We must start lobbying comprehensively for family support.
Joshua, do you want to share your comments? Or you decide between yourselves.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's just interesting. This is actually the first time I've been able to hear that definition of permanency used by any agency, organization, nonprofit, anything like that. So I had the opportunity about 4 years ago to travel the country advocating, inspiring foster youth through the Foster Club All-Star Program. And we discussed permanency in those same terms. That was our definition of permanency. And it seems like before that time, permanency was described as a placement. And we need to place children in a place that's safe. And that's kind of what our goal is for child welfare. But actually, the way we described permanency was that lifetime commitment from someone who would love us, care for us, who would share with us a mutual agreement to take care of us and love and support us. And so I thank you guys for being able to finally publish that in information and from nonprofits and agencies like that, because I think that's important. And we need to redefine what permanency is. Permanency is important. Just in my internship experience recently, we talk about permanency, we're talking about disproportionality. And some of the things that some of the caseworkers have mentioned to me is how hard it is to place children with some of their relatives. And I think that a lot of times what we do as workers or what we do in child welfare is that sometimes we don't want to go to relatives that are associated with a parent that we had to remove a kid from. And I think that we have to be able to we're social workers for one. And I'm becoming a social worker. And so I think that in being a social worker, you can use, there's flexibility basically. And so you have to be able to look at other relatives. And I want to say, and a lot of people might not agree with this comment, but I'm going to say, if you know that there's someone in the family who has a felony, you guys might not think that that's a great idea to place that child with that relative. But if that person does not have a felony that may it's not any aggressiveness, assault, murder. It might be a basic drug charge when they were 20 years old and now they're 40. It may be something like that. We need to look around for those type. That's permanency. Someone who has lived life, they've been able to gain experience, they've changed. Guess what? People do change. Those type of things, we really need to look at that. Just finding those connections, finding people who will love these children, because for my family and being in being in the foster care system, my aunt loved me so much, and she wanted to be there for me. But due to the lack of support and resources that the agency provided, and I was actually placed first in Seattle's child welfare, Washington's care. So that's where my aunt lives. And she could not care for me. She could not provide that permanency for me because of the lack of resources and the support the agency wasn't providing to our family. So I think that as the agency and whatever role you play here, we all play that role, and we need to support keeping families together. We need to support making sure that we're asking coaches, we're asking advisors, we're asking people that you wouldn't necessarily ask if they are willing to be a permanent connection for a child. And the other thing I want to just share is I attended Benson High School, graduated in 2006, and I don't think I would be here today if it wasn't for my teachers. And I always tell people that because my teachers were the ones there for me the first time I was placed in care. My teachers were the ones who called CPS for me when I needed to be removed from the home I was in. And so those teachers have always supported me. They've always cared for me. They've always believed in me. And I think that that's important. Those are important people that you can utilize to serve as permanent connections. And out of this, what I'm getting at is it was something as simple as TAing, serving as a teacher's aide in the office. And I met a secretary. And that secretary is someone who provides parental guidance to me, support, love, encouragement for me today. Those people I now call my godparents, her and her husband, and they're there for me. I know I can count on them. I know they love me, and I go everywhere with them. They take me on vacations, and that's just it's a positive. But I think that's not, I just know that if anything happens, they're going to be there for me. They're a call away. They call and they check up on me. That is what permanency is. And guess what? You can be any age and be adopted. I have people that I've served on the All-Star internship with who are 24, 25, who've been adopted. And I think that all of our responsibility now is that to look for those people who've aged out, because it doesn't only start with the kids in care, it starts with those who are already out. And if we don't prevent them from becoming felons, if we don't prevent them from, getting addicted to drugs, then we're going to be in a world of hurt. And you think we're in one now, we're going to be in a serious world of hurt. We've got to get it together. It's our obligation to give back to our communities and to keep our communities together. It's our obligation to help kids find permanent connections. Thank you.
Well, I don't know anyone in their right mind who wants to follow that. I should have grabbed the mic more quickly.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank everybody also for being here, because it's really inspiring as a part of the system in this state that's serving kids to see so many people here on a Friday evening committing themselves to having this conversation and to talking about our system and what we need to do to support children and families better. So I really thank all of you for your time and your effort tonight and for your support. What I thought I could do with my set of comments is maybe just contextualize this a little bit in Oregon and just make sure that everybody here understands kind of what we're doing, what's happening with our kids and families here locally. And what's really been affirming about this presentation today is that Oregon has set in motion almost all of the improvement efforts that have been mentioned as part of this lecture, and it's just really encouraging to look forward to the outcomes of those efforts. So I just want to mention a few things. In Oregon in 2009, about 13,300 children had at least one day of experience in foster care. That's about 1.5% of all children in the state. Oregon has around 870,000 children, so 13,300 of them spent time in our foster care system in 2009. Most of those kids did go home, almost 60% of them. And 23.5% were adopted, and 6% went into guardianship. So in our system, we had a success rate of permanency of around 89%. But we had about 11% of kids who were emancipated, who went into other systems, or for whom the outcome really wasn't what we had hoped for in terms of permanency. One of the things that we've done in our system over the last 2 years is really begin to have, we think, a little bit more clarity of purpose around what it is that we want to be about and what it is that we want to focus our improvement efforts around. As many of you probably really well understand, the child welfare system is often a system that's very reactive. It's reactive by design to the kinds of calls and information that we get. But it also tends to have to react quite a bit to the pressures of the environment, to the pressures of community, the media, politics, other things. So what we've been really trying to do in child welfare is have clarity of purpose and really focus our energy on the things that we know work for kids and families, and focus on those things that we believe that we can do in partnership with communities to make those things happen. One of the things that we really foundationally believe is that foster care should be a temporary experience for kids, and that our involvement in the lives of families should be very judiciously executed. And I'm really proud of our workforce because they've really embraced the fact that we really want to be about two overarching goals. In this state, we want to be sure that we are making an active effort to safely and equitably reduce the number of children who need foster care in the state. And you've heard a little bit about how that happens. You decrease the number of kids who come into the system. You do that in a safe way. You don't leave kids at risk, but you keep them safe at home with people who can care for them in their homes. Or you increase the time by which you get them home to a permanent arrangement or family. We're also thinking very seriously around the issues of equity, because in the state we have overrepresentation. We have significant overrepresentation of kids of color who are African American and Native American. And as our data begins to sort itself out and become more clear, and our demographics looking forward are on the horizon, we know that we've got some really significant challenges. If we want to safely reduce foster care, we've got to do it in a way that's equitable, so that we're not disproportionately harming families, and so that we're serving families in an equitable, fair, objective, and high-quality way, no matter the color of their skin, and that's a huge part of this initiative for us. The other thing we're really focused on is relatives, connectivity, and it's not just about placement. It's about engagement and placement, finding, connecting, making sure that kids have those connections, and we're doing it from the first day they come into care. So Family Find, some of those things that you heard about today are becoming an active part of the way that we do the work in partnership with communities to find people who can become permanent connections for kids and maybe even help us avoid that child needing a foster care placement in the first place. And of course, we want to be about, for those kids who need us, we want to be sure that their experience in foster care is absolutely safe, that they don't get hurt again while they're in care, that it's stable, and that connectivity to relatives and family actually does a lot around the issues of safety and stability. A lot of these things are all interrelated. And we've got a very significant focus on meeting the behavioral health needs of kids in care, because while in the general population, about 20% of all kids experience a behavioral health issue, in foster care it's closer to 80%. And so we know that if we can keep kids and address their improvement, their behavioral health outcomes, we can improve their placement stability, improve their long-term outcomes as children, and hopefully provide some continuity for them as they leave us with a system that can continue to support them and their caregivers as they continue on in their lives and don't need our system. I'm really proud to say we're actually seeing results. There are numerous strategies that we've been implementing to do this work, and I think that I just want to highlight a few things that I think are challenges and then a few opportunities, and then maybe I'll turn it back over to Josh so he can inspire everybody some more. But I do think the conversation that we're having in the state around child welfare equity is one of our greatest challenges and one of our greatest opportunities. Oregon is a state that hasn't traditionally had this conversation very openly, and it's a difficult conversation sometimes to have no matter where you live. So I think that one of our greatest challenges and opportunities is to serve kids of color and their families differently and better. And I think another area of challenge for us is going to mean that we need to engage communities in our work directly. They need to be much more involved at the table, supporting the children and families that we're serving and supporting us as a system, and working alongside us, with us in partnership, not sort of the exclusivity that has happened, I think, in our history of a system. So that's another challenge. All challenges are opportunity, I think. Another challenge for us is that, quite frankly, you referenced the issue of upfront investment. In Oregon, our upfront investment in children and families is relatively small, and it's getting smaller by the day. We do very, very little to support children and families before something goes wrong. We have some significant investments now in our TANF program, and those are totally at risk at the moment, and that's our program for the poorest of the poor. 99% of children and families in the state who avail themselves of services in TANF have zero income. We want to be a system and a state that does more for families before families and kids ever get to that point. So we really have to continue, I think, in this system to champion for those front-end supports, because we'll never succeed in helping families stay whole if we don't do that, and we can avoid so much hurt to children and families if we do. And I think the other challenge, of course, is resources throughout the system. Josh mentioned supports for caregivers. There are a lot of people who really do want to be involved in the lives of our kids and who just need a little bit of extra support to do that. Our workforce needs support. The services that we need for kids need to be more inclusive and individually tailored to their needs. And we're working on a lot of different things in that area, even in this difficult economy. I think some of the biggest opportunities that we have in this state are the fact that we have clarity of purpose, and one of the things that encourages me every day is that clarity of purpose and those strategies and those goals are really supported by communities, by the court system, by local education, and by our staff. And I don't think we can have success if we're not all marching in the same direction. And I think it's really encouraging after a couple of years of conversation. Oregon's a state where we like to process a lot of things. We have a lot of process here. Where we're at the point where we're saying, yes, this is what we're about, and we've got communities that are working together, engaging in these conversations and talking about how they can become supporters of child welfare, not sit on the outside and talk about how child welfare isn't helping their community and isn't helping their families. So we're actually working on things together in a more direct and focused way than I think we have in the past. And I really want to mention that our staff, I think, are one of our greatest assets in the state. We have a fantastic partnership here with Portland State around training and development. And we also have, I just think, an incredibly dedicated workforce. My personal belief is that you will really never come across people who are more courageous, people who are, just more incredibly committed than people who dedicate themselves and their lives to this work. I call it servant leadership. There's really nothing about it that's glamorous. Usually the recognition you receive is negative when something goes wrong, and you're not normally credited when things are going well. But it requires leadership to continue to know what my staff know about what adults do to kids and to keep showing up every day. So I think our staff are some of our greatest assets, and we really have to continue to support and invest in them. And conversations like this really do that. So it's really, I'm grateful to be a part of it and to be a part of what I think is just, as you said, I think I tried to write down what you said about just sort of this renewed effort around permanency. We are moving into a permanency roundtable experience in this state. It's already been happening in a little bit more of an ad hoc way, even in Multnomah County. And I'm really proud to report that 200 kids who were on APLA plans now have plans that are driving them to permanency as opposed to foster care permanency, which really isn't permanent. And so that's even before we've started to kick off this more formal permanency roundtable process that you've heard about today. And we're really excited to become part of that effort and to really move toward a road where we know that every child who's in care has something before them that doesn't include us, because that's what we're really about. We hope that we could maybe put ourselves out of business someday. But I really appreciate all of your support, and thank you for being here, and thanks for the chance to comment tonight.
So We are mindful of the time, but I think we should open it up for any questions you might have for Peter or the panel. We'll have a few questions and then wrap things up. Joan, you can be at the front of the line.
Well, I am so struck by how hard it is for us to learn in child welfare. The statistics that Peter quoted from the new roundtables are almost exactly the statistics that Peter quoted from his roundtables are almost exactly the statistics that Art found in his new look at children that needed permanency in many, many years ago. We don't learn very easily, do we?
I think it's a smaller group of, we've had more children placed, but I think we've got a smaller group of these children now who truly are drifting in care thanks to the early work. But then the issue is, as I mentioned, is what do you do about those the APLA youth, and how do we move them through? But you're right, ironically, isn't it funny? When you do something about those children, where do they end up going? They end up going home, adoption, and then the newest thing, which is this legal guardianship, which I think is one of the most beautiful strategies this country has ever come up with to sort of honor families that don't want to terminate parental rights but do want to care for their children. I think maybe that's going to be our one of the bonus strategies that we can use. But you're right, it's funny how sometimes we have to sort of relearn some of the basics that were taught to us so long ago.
Well, but also, Joan, isn't it true that we're stuck with some of the kinds of problems that on a permanent basis almost that create them? I mean, you can't, not everything works. and people fall through the cracks, and it does, or have crises that are tough to to deal with. So it seems almost inevitable that the idea of being able to wipe it out entirely is not plausible. But there's a great deal that can be done to make that system zip along instead of drag.
And taking a fresh look at it.
Yeah.
Seems to be one of them.
That's right. Absolutely.
Hi. So I have a question. I grew up in foster care, and I'm here in the MSW program, and I have my internship at DHS admin, and I've been hearing a lot of the conversations happening about disproportionality and lowering the numbers, and I think some really great, fabulous work is happening. What I never hear about, and I think is very important, is the actual quality of the foster homes and who we're having as foster parents. And I can tell you, growing up in the system, that everything that we're doing to reduce the numbers and the work we're doing now is important, but also the quality of the places I live made a huge impact on my life. Why is that conversation missing?
I appreciate that. It actually is happening, and in fact, just this week, for the last 90 days, we've had a group of people that have really been focused on our foster care, the foster care experience from more of a negative lens, quite frankly, looking at where things go wrong, why do they go wrong, and what is it that we need to do to avoid that from happening in the future. And so they're putting out a series of recommendations to improve the quality of foster care, improve the safety of kids' experience in foster care, and to help us as a system support foster parents better, because I think often it often comes back to the system needing to be available to them as a support as they serve our kids. The other thing I think that really is important, and it gets back to this conversation about relatives and family, and we're redesigning and redefining relative in this state. We're actually putting out a new policy this month that talks about relative differently than we have in the past, and recognizes that you maybe don't have to have a blood relationship to a child to be somebody that's important in that child's life, that we as a system should recognize as a relative or as kith or kin, and then that person has a different kind of place in our system, and we know then that the quality of care that they deliver can be better. So it is happening, maybe not quite as overtly as it's good feedback, that we need to have that conversation more loudly than we're having it, but I want to just assure you that that conversation is being had.
KC Family Programs has a goal for this country to reduce foster care by half by 2020. But we always say reduce by half safely, and then the other part of the conversation is we advocate for reinvestment of those savings back into, as Erin mentioned, the front end for family supports and for higher quality services. We didn't have time today to focus on it, so your question is an excellent one. With lower caseload and more dollars going in to support the quality of foster care, because we have fewer children in care, we're hoping that the children who do end up in foster care get a better life experience while they're there and will have more foster parents to choose from, so that the types of foster parents that maybe we can help match children with will be better. So your point is so well taken, and it's I hope that's the legacy of the lesson, the lower numbers of children in care, is that we don't lose, Erin doesn't lose those dollars as an agency, but has the opportunity to reinvest them in quality services and then move upstream to more of the prevention services that I think we all would want to see happen.
One last dynamic I think is worth mentioning that brings together Ms. Shireman's question and yours is that I think that the children that we're serving in our system today and the families' needs are much, much different than they were 30 years ago, and I could be wrong, but on one, there are two dynamics to me that really shape that. One is that, the largest issue that's contributing to abuse and neglect in Oregon is alcohol and drug addiction, and the second largest issue is domestic violence. And most of the kids who come in not because they were physically or sexually abused, but because of neglect issues. And those are very different. Those are different issues that require a different kind of response from our system, and the families also require a different kind of response. If you think about the time it takes to recover from a substance abuse issue, ASFA didn't necessarily contemplate methamphetamine when it was passed, and I think that's a pretty significant driver. And so we have kids that are in our system longer. When you look back to why they came there, it's different. And the other dynamic is, in Oregon, actually, over the last 4 years, we have reduced our foster care population by about 20%. That means the kids that we're serving are arguably more in need of that service, so some of their needs are more complex, which means we've got to have a better ability to meet those needs. So there are these different drivers that I think relate both to why we need to relearn some of the basics, and also then why the quality issues become more relevant and need to be more tailored to the kids that we're currently serving, and make sure that we're paying attention to that and not assuming that one size fits all.
Well, I know the sign of a good program is that you leave them wanting more. So unfortunately, we have to turn it over to Christy, but there will be another Shireman lecture next year.
Right, and and we do have more refreshments out there, so we want to invite you to join us. I do want to thank the people who put this together, specifically Tom Keller, Eileen Brennan, Catherine Kahn, Aaron Perlman, and Sandy Wiscarson worked on it, and the staff, Deirdre Edwards and Crystal Fromling, worked very hard to put this together. So let's give them all a round of applause. I also want to remind you of the little white envelope that you received, which is available to help you help our students to continue in school and to become the kind of social workers we all will be proud of. And finally, another round of applause for our excellent speaker and our panel today. So please have some more food, enjoy the beautiful view, and thank you so much for coming.